Stories at Work.
Hi, this is Stories at Work. Today we're breaking down a dramatized and fictional story from the world of corporate finance and internal systems about how my bonus was approved. The bonus hit my portal on a Tuesday morning, right between two things I hate: an all-hands invite titled Operational Discipline and a Slack message that just said, "Quick sync," with no context. I was still in my coat, badge lanyard twisted around my fingers, when I saw it. Annual performance bonus. Approved. Same payout window we were promised. Same amount I'd calculated 3 different ways on my own spreadsheet, because I didn't trust hope. I stood there in the hallway outside finance ops, staring at the screen like it could change if I blinked. Then my manager, Maris Haldane, stepped out of the glass conference room with her usual calm face, the kind that makes every sentence sound like policy. "Kellen," she said, holding out her hand. "Congratulations. You earned it." Her nails were clean, neutral polish. She had that tidy executive habit of speaking like she was doing you a favor by acknowledging your existence. I shook her hand anyway. "Thanks," I said. "It's been a year." "That's one word for it," she replied, and her smile didn't move her eyes. "Payroll runs Thursday. You'll see it land." I watched her walk away, already tapping an email on her phone. No pause, no warmth. Just a transaction. But I still felt the relief in my chest, like the moment you hear your car start after a week of weird noises. Because I had earned it. I wasn't sales. I wasn't product. I was the person who cleaned up the messes those teams left behind. Finance systems, comp data, approvals, audit trails. The unglamorous work that keeps a company from getting sued, fined, or embarrassed in public. For months, we'd been bleeding people. Quiet exits. Restructures. Budget alignment. Words that mean someone high up made a promise to Wall Street they couldn't keep, and now the rest of us were paying for it. And still, I stayed. I stayed late to reconcile mismatched headcount files when HRIS glitched. I untangled duplicated employee IDs when payroll imports broke. I sat through calls with our outsourced payroll vendor while they blamed system latency for mistakes that were clearly human. I kept the whole thing from tipping over. So yeah, when that bonus showed approved, it felt like proof that I wasn't invisible. I clicked into the details. Our portal wasn't fancy, just a clunky internal page with a bunch of expandable fields. Payout schedule, tax withholding, bank deposit confirmation, and at the bottom, one section most people never open: allocation. Because technically, bonuses don't just pay out, they post to the books. They hit a cost object. Usually it's straightforward: your name, your employee ID, your department cost center. I expanded it, and my stomach did that slow sinking thing, like an elevator cable got cut. Recipient. C417. Operational recovery. No employee ID. No department lead. No person. A cost center. I stared at it, waiting for my brain to explain it away. Maybe it was a display issue. Maybe the portal was pulling the wrong label. Maybe the recipient field meant something else. So I refreshed. Same. I logged out and back in. Same. I took a screenshot because I've learned something about moments like this. If you don't capture them, someone will tell you they never happened. I opened our finance mapping table, something I had access to because my role was literally to keep these integrations clean. CC417 wasn't a normal cost center. It was a temporary ledger bucket created after the board demanded a recovery plan. And I knew what that phrase meant at Arborcrest Systems, because it had been floating around like smoke for weeks. Operational recovery was how leadership described the budget hole they refused to name out loud. I looked around the office: gray carpet, glass walls, the quiet hum of overpriced air conditioning, people walking with laptops like shields, the soft clicking of keyboards like everyone was pretending nothing was wrong. And in that moment, I realized the bonus wasn't coming to me. It was being reassigned. redirected, reclassified, and Maris had just shaken my hand and told me I earned it. I didn't walk into her office. I didn't confront her in the hallway. I didn't start a scene. I don't do scenes. I've always believed the cleanest power move is calm, because calm leaves less to argue with later. Everything after a period is noise, so I did what I always do when something feels off. I started building a timeline. First, I pulled my last performance review packet, saved it locally, printed to PDF, timestamped. Then I opened the compensation memo HR had sent in December, the one that promised discretionary awards based on contribution and outcome. I exported that too. Then I checked my email for the original bonus announcement, the one from the CFO, Dorian Kest, with his polished, "We value our people" language. I read it again slowly, and I noticed something I'd ignored the first time, because I'd been naive enough to focus on the number. It didn't say you will receive a bonus. It said bonus pools will be distributed. Distributed by whom? I opened our internal ticketing system and searched for any changes tied to CC417. Nothing obvious, but that didn't reassure me. It just told me whoever did it knew how to hide their footsteps. I stood up, walked to the break room, and poured coffee I didn't want. Across the room, 2 payroll analysts were whispering near the vending machine. I couldn't hear the words, but I could read the expression. That tight face people wear when they're trying to decide if they should warn someone or protect themselves. When I walked in, they went silent. That silence wasn't awkward, it was instructed. I took my coffee, nodded like everything was normal, and walked back to my desk. I sat down, opened a new blank document, and typed a title that felt ridiculous until it didn't. Bonus reallocation. Evidence log. Then I wrote the first line. Observed approved bonus in portal. Allocation recipient displays cost center CC417 operational recovery. And under that, I added the second line, because I already knew what my next step had to be. Verify whether this is limited to me or systemic, because if I was the only one, it was personal. But if it was happening to others too, then it wasn't just theft, it was a program. By Wednesday morning, I'd stopped thinking of it as my bonus. I was thinking of it as a pattern I hadn't found yet. I didn't ask Maris about it. Not because I was scared of her, because asking would give her something more valuable than my anger. Time. And time is what people like her use to rewrite reality. So instead, I did something that looked harmless. I opened a ticket. Not a dramatic one. Not, they stole my money. Just a clean finance systems ticket titled, Bonus Portal Allocation Field Displaying Non-Employee Recipient. I attached one screenshot. No accusations. Just facts. Then I tagged the ticket to the correct queue. Compop's Integration, the team that manages the feed between finance and HR. And I waited. While it sat there, I started checking the only place leadership never thinks to clean, the quiet data exhaust. Our bonus portal pulled from 2 sources, HR for eligibility and finance for allocation. The portal itself was just a front end. The truth lived in the back-end tables. I had access to read-only logs because I built half the reconciliation scripts 2 years ago when we migrated systems and everything broke. So I went into the reporting layer and searched for my employee ID. What came up wasn't comforting. My bonus record existed. Approved status, payout date, amount, everything normal. But the allocation object wasn't my department cost center anymore. It was CC417. And there was a change record with a timestamp, late Monday night. After Maris had gone home, after most people had stopped working. The modifier wasn't Maris. It was a service account. FIN-ALLOC-SVC, which is exactly the kind of account you use when you want to say, the system did it. I stared at that line for a long time, and then I opened the audit logs for FIN-ALLOC-SVC. There were dozens of changes, not just mine, cost center swaps, allocation updates, reclassifications, and almost all of them had the same target. CC417, operational recovery. My mouth went dry, because the system wasn't glitching. The system was being used like a broom. I pulled a sample of 50 records into a spreadsheet and cross-referenced them against employee departments. People from engineering, people from sales, people from customer success, even a few from legal. Different teams, different leaders, same outcome. A bonus approved, then routed into the same cost center bucket. And that's when the first truly ugly thought landed in my head. They might still tell people they got a bonus, because on the surface the portal said approved. But the accounting recipient was no longer them, which meant, depending on how payroll processed it, either the bonus would quietly never hit their bank, and leadership would blame tax timing, payroll delays, bank processing, or it would hit their bank, but be clawed back later under some adjustment, or it would be offset inside the system so the employee never saw the full amount. There were a dozen ways to do it, all of them ugly, all of them explainable. If you controlled HR, finance, and the narrative. At lunch, I tested something small. I didn't go to a friend. Friends panic, friends gossip. I went to someone who values procedure more than emotion. Bren Iver, a payroll analyst who'd been here long enough to stop smiling. I didn't say stolen. I didn't say fraud. I didn't say illegal. I just slid into the chair across from him with my phone face down and said, "Can I ask you something weird without making it weird?" He kept eating, eyes on his salad. "Depends," he said. "Will it ruin my afternoon?" "Probably." That got his attention. Just a glance. I leaned in slightly, not secretive, controlled. "In the bonus portal," I said, "have you ever seen the recipient field populate with a cost center code instead of an employee ID?" Bren's fork stopped midair. He didn't answer right away, which told me everything. Then he swallowed and said carefully, "Why are you asking?" "I saw it on mine." His eyes flicked to the left, then to the right, like the room had cameras even though it didn't. He lowered his voice. "You didn't hear it from me," he said, "but people in payroll have been getting complaints." "Complaints about what?" He exhaled through his nose like he was deciding how much danger to invite into his life. "People are checking their portals," he said, "and the numbers look right. But there's confusion about where it posts." "Posts where?" I asked, even though I already knew. He didn't say the code. He didn't have to. Instead, he said, "A recovery bucket." Hearing it from him made it real in a way the logs hadn't, because logs can be argued with. But fear doesn't exist for no reason. I kept my face neutral. "Is payroll going to stop it?" Bren gave a humorless laugh. "Payroll doesn't stop anything," he said. "Payroll processes what finance approves." "And finance approved this?" Bren hesitated. Then he said, "Finance approved a lot of things lately." That was his way of saying, "Yes, and you're not supposed to ask." I nodded once. Calm, like I'd expected that answer. Then I asked the question that mattered. "Do you know how they're justifying it?" Bren took a slow bite, buying time. Finally, he said, "They're calling it a temporary hold, like a stabilization measure. A hold on employee bonuses." He stared at me now. "People are scared," he said, "because the portal still says approved, so leadership can claim they did it. They can show the board the screen. They can say, look, we rewarded performance." "But the money," Bren cut me off with a look. "The money," he said quietly, "goes where they need it." I felt a cold pressure behind my ribs, because this wasn't just unfair. This was a deliberate design to create plausible deniability. And suddenly Maris's handshake made sense, because she could look you in the eye and say you earned it. And technically, in her world, the bonus was approved. What happened after approval wasn't her problem. That was system behavior. That was finance allocation. That was operational recovery. I went back to my desk, and my Compops ticket still hadn't been touched. No comments, no assignment, no acknowledgement. But I did see something else. A calendar invite popped onto my screen. From Maris. Kellen, quick sync. 15 minutes. No agenda. No notes. Just the kind of invite that exists for one reason, to see what you know. I stared at it, then opened my evidence log and added a new line. Manager scheduled. Meeting after ticket creation. Possible awareness or monitoring. I didn't know it yet. But that meeting wasn't to help me. It was to find out whether I was going to be quiet. And by the time I stepped into the glass room, I'd already decided something. If they wanted to play it like a system problem, then I would treat it like a system problem too. Because systems leave trails, and trails don't care how powerful you are. Maris didn't greet me like a manager. She greeted me like legal. Same calm posture, same neutral smile. Same tone that makes every sentence sound like it was pre-approved in an email thread I wasn't on. The glass room was too clean, whiteboard wiped, table empty, no laptop open, nothing that could accidentally become discoverable. Close the door? She asked. I closed it. She waited for me to sit first like we were negotiating. Then she folded her hands and said, I saw your ticket. No hi. No, how are you? Just that. I kept my face steady. Okay. She nodded once, like I'd confirmed a hypothesis. It's a display issue, she said. The portal is pulling the allocation label incorrectly. I didn't argue. I didn't even react. I just asked calmly, Is my bonus still paying out on Thursday? Maris held my gaze. Yes. That's the intent. The intent? Not yes. Not of course. The intent. That single phrase felt like a crack in the wall. I let a beat pass, then said, Can you send that in writing? Her smile tightened by a millimeter. Kellen, she said, I don't want you getting anxious over internal fields you don't normally look at. That was the first time the mask slipped into something sharper. Internal fields you don't normally look at. Translation. Stop looking where you're allowed to look. I leaned back slightly, like I was listening. I look at them because it's part of my job, I said. The allocation layer affects downstream reconciliation. Maris nodded again, slow, patient, like I was a child explaining something cute. You've done great work, she said. This year has been brutal, but we also need everyone aligned right now. Aligned. That word didn't belong in a conversation about a bonus. That word belonged in a conversation about silence. I kept my voice flat. So it's not a display issue. Maris blinked once. It is? Then it should be easy to confirm in writing, I said. Just a line. Bonus will pay out as approved, no reclassification affecting employee payout. Her eyes held mine, and in that moment, I saw what she was doing. She wasn't trying to convince me. She was trying to see how far I'd go. Because if I backed down now, they could keep doing it. And if I didn't, then I became a problem they had to manage. Maris exhaled softly, the kind of sigh people use when they're about to sound reasonable. Kellen, she said, I'm going to be transparent with you. That sentence is never followed by transparency. We're in a recovery quarter, she continued. Leadership made commitments. There are temporary stabilization measures. I didn't interrupt. She leaned forward slightly. And yes, some funds are being held at a higher level until certain milestones clear. Milestones, I repeated. She nodded. Board-facing milestones. There it was. Not a glitch. Not a mislabel. A hold on money that was promised to employees. And my bonus? I asked. Maris paused for the first time. Not long, but long enough. It's approved, she said again, like she was clinging to the only safe word she had. I looked at her, then said, Approved doesn't mean paid. Maris's jaw tightened. Don't turn this into something it's not. I almost smiled because that was the line people use when they know exactly what it is. I kept my tone controlled. So what happens Thursday? Maris sat back. Payroll will process what they receive. What they receive from finance, I said. She didn't deny it. She tried a new angle. You're a high performer, she said. You'll be taken care of. You have a future here. The word future landed like a threat wrapped in a compliment, because I'd heard it before. When companies say future, they mean, don't make us regret investing in you. I nodded once like I appreciated it. Then I asked the question I'd already answered in the logs. Is this just me, or is it happening across teams? Maris's eyes sharpened. Why would you ask that? I held her gaze. Because I saw the service account making the changes. Silence. Not awkward silence. The kind that happens when someone's internally recalculating. Maris didn't speak for a full 2 breaths. Then she said carefully, You accessed audit logs? I have read-only access, I replied, for operational integrity. Her expression stayed neutral, but the energy changed. The air went colder. Kellen, she said softly, you need to be very careful. That wasn't advice. That was a warning. I didn't flinch. Then you need to be very careful too, I said, because service accounts leave trails, and trails become evidence if someone asks the wrong questions. Maris's eyes flicked down for half a second, like she hated that I used the word evidence. Then she looked up and said something that told me exactly how this was going to end if I didn't act. Hey, you're not the only person who wants that money, she said, and you're not the only person who can lose something. There it was. The first honest sentence she'd spoken all meeting. I stood up slowly, keeping my voice level. I'm not trying to be difficult, I said. I'm trying to make sure the company doesn't create a problem it can't explain later. Maris stayed seated. You should let this go, she said. I nodded like I was considering it. Then I opened the door and walked out without another word. Back at my desk, my hands were steady, but my chest felt tight. Because now I knew 2 things with certainty. 1, the bonus reallocation was real. 2, they were already watching who noticed. I opened my evidence log again and typed, Manager acknowledged stabilization measures. Refused written confirmation. Warned to be careful. Implied consequences. Then I added the next line because I realized something that made my skin go cold. If they could reroute bonuses into a cost center, they could reroute blame too. And in a company desperate to look clean for the board, the easiest person to sacrifice is the person who knows where the bodies are buried. I didn't know it yet, but by the end of the week, my name was going to appear in a place it didn't belong. And once it did, they'd try to make sure it stayed there. Friday started with a calendar invite from HR that I'd never seen in 10 years at Arborcrest. Administrative meeting, attendance required. No agenda, no prep, just a time, a room, and that bland HR tone that turns your stomach before you even know why. When I walked in, Etta Voss from HR was already there with a laptop closed in front of her like a shield. Next to her sat a man I recognized from legal, Soren Malk, deputy counsel, the type who never speaks unless he's already decided the outcome. Maris was there too, not seated with them, standing near the window, arms folded, watching me like this was a test I was supposed to fail quietly. Etta gestured to the chair across from her. Kellen, thank you for joining. I sat. I kept my hands on the table. Calm posture, no fidgeting, no anger. Etta clicked her pen once. This is an administrative inquiry regarding unauthorized access to financial allocation logs. I waited. Soren slid a single sheet of paper across the table. We have reason to believe you exceeded your role-based access and exported internal audit data. I glanced down. The page didn't show what I had actually done. It showed a narrative. My name, my employee ID, a timestamp window, a claim that I accessed restricted compensation data and shared it externally. Externally, that word was the entire trap, because once they say externally, they don't have to prove much. They just have to imply risk. I looked up. Who did I share it with? Etta didn't answer. She looked at Maris, then back to me. This is not a debate, Etta said. This is a fact-finding process. Soren leaned forward. If you cooperate, we can resolve this cleanly. Cleanly. Same language as the severance stories you hear in hallways? same corporate script, same promise that if you don't resist, they'll make the pain quick. I nodded slowly. Okay, let's do facts. Maris's eyes narrowed just slightly. I reached into my bag and set my laptop on the table. Eda's posture stiffened. You don't need a computer. I do, I said, because you're accusing me of doing something inside a system. Systems have logs. We're going to use them. Soren's voice stayed smooth. You're not authorized to. I'm authorized to defend myself, I said, still calm. And I'm not asking to access anything new. I'm asking you to look at what you're already claiming exists. Eda hesitated. That was the moment I realized they were counting on one thing. Fear. Fear makes people talk too much. Fear makes them contradict themselves. I didn't give them any. I opened a ticket in Compops integration, I continued. That's documented. After that, Maris scheduled a meeting, also documented. Then the day after, I received this HR invite. So if we're building a timeline, it starts there. Maris's jaw tightened. Eda glanced at Soren, unsure. Soren shifted. You're trying to redirect. No, I said. I'm trying to keep this accurate. Then I pulled up my evidence log, not the dramatic version, the clean one, screenshots with timestamps, the ticket ID, the meeting invite, the portal allocation page showing the cost center recipient. Every item dated, sequential, and boring in the way that makes it hard to argue. Eda's eyes flicked down, faster now, reading. Soren watched my screen without blinking. Maris stared at the table. I clicked to the part that mattered most. I didn't export restricted compensation data, I said. I pulled my own record and observed a reclassification. That's within my role, and I did not share it externally. I asked payroll a general question about whether recipient fields can display cost centers. That's it. Soren's tone changed slightly, still polite, but sharper. We have a record of your access. Great, I said. Show me the record that proves external sharing. Silence. Eda cleared her throat. We're still investigating. I nodded once. Then don't accuse me of it. Maris finally spoke. Kellen, you're escalating. I turned to her, calm. You escalated when you sent HR after me. Her eyes flashed. I didn't send anyone. I didn't argue. I just opened one more item. The service account audit summary. Not raw logs, a report. Sanitized. The kind that can be shared internally without breaching anything. It showed a cluster of allocation changes routed into operational recovery. And it showed the approval workflow tag associated with those changes. The approvals were linked to a finance control group, a group Maris owned. Eda's face tightened. Maris, is that your control group? Maris didn't answer quickly enough. And that's when Soren did something I didn't expect. He held out his hand. Send me that report. Maris's head snapped toward him. Soren, he didn't look at her. I asked for the report. That was the first crack in their formation, because legal doesn't like surprises, and what I was showing them wasn't a disgruntled employee. It was a documented process that could become a compliance nightmare if it surfaced the wrong way. Eda's voice got quieter. Kellen, why didn't you come to HR? I looked at her. I tried to go through the system. I filed a ticket. Then my manager warned me to be careful. Then I got this meeting. Soren leaned back, evaluating. Maris stood rigid by the window, breathing through her nose like she was trying not to say something that would be used against her later. I didn't gloat. I didn't push too hard. I did something more dangerous than anger. I stayed professional. I'm not here to burn the company down, I said. I'm here to stop a bad idea before it becomes a headline. Eda swallowed. We need a break. They stepped out. All three. I stayed in the room alone. No panic, no shaking. Just a steady clarity. Because I understood the real game now. They weren't trying to fire me for looking at logs. They were trying to label me as the risk so nobody asked why the bonuses were being vacuumed into a cost center. 10 minutes later, Eda came back in alone. Her face looked different, like she'd just been told something she couldn't unhear. "We're pausing the administrative inquiry," she said, "effective immediately." I kept my expression neutral. "Okay." She hesitated, then added, "You'll receive written confirmation." I nodded once. "Good." Then she said something that told me the chaos had already jumped rooms. "And please don't discuss this with anyone while legal reviews." I didn't promise anything. I didn't need to. Because I had something better than gossip. I had documentation. As I walked back to my desk, my badge still worked, but the office felt different. People looked away. Slack went unusually quiet. The kind of quiet that happens when someone high up is making calls. On my monitor, a new email appeared from Legal. Internal review notice subject. Temporary hold on non-contractual discretionary awards. Temporary hold. They were trying to rename it before it became theft. And attached to that email was a list of impacted allocations. Not names, not mine, not anyone's. Just cost centers, including CC 417. And for the first time since Tuesday, I let myself breathe. Because they'd just done something they couldn't undo. They put it in writing. I saved the email. I saved the attachment. I saved the headers. Then I opened my bank app just to see if Thursday's deposit had hit. It hadn't. Not for me, not for anyone. Which meant the next move wasn't going to be quiet. It was going to be public, inside the company first. And if they chose the wrong scapegoat, they were going to learn what happens when a person who understands systems stops playing defense. In corporate fights, emotion gets dismissed, but timelines don't. If you want control, you don't raise your voice. You raise your evidence quality. Tickets, timestamps, written notices, those are the only witnesses that don't get scared. By the time I got home that night, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "We can fix this. Just say you misunderstood." I stared at it for a long time because I finally understood what fix meant to them, and I was done being the quiet option. Saturday morning, my phone lit up with a company-wide email that hit everyone's inbox like a fire alarm. Subject: Discretionary Awards, Update, Process Adjustment. It was signed by the CFO, Dorian Kest, and it read like every corporate apology that tries to sound compassionate while keeping liability low. They blamed system alignment. They blamed timing. They promised a revised distribution plan. But the one line that mattered, the one line I knew would set off panic, was buried in the middle like they hoped nobody would read that far. Previously approved discretionary awards may be temporarily delayed pending financial controls review. Maybe. Temporarily. Delayed. 3 words that turn a promise into fog. And right on cue, Slack started to melt. People weren't asking if they were getting paid. They were asking how long leadership thought they could lie to their faces. I didn't post. I didn't react. I opened my laptop and did the boring work that wins wars. I built a clean packet, not a rant, not a call-out, a timeline. Screenshot of my portal, showing approved with allocation, routed to operational recovery. My ticket ID and Compop's integration with timestamp, Maris's meeting invite, and her refusal to put anything in writing. The HR administrative meeting invite, timestamp legal's email, temporary hold on non-contractual discretionary awards with headers. The attachment listing impacted allocations, including CC 417. Then I added one more thing that made it airtight. A reconciliation report showing that FINALLOCSVC had changed dozens of allocation objects in the same window, late Monday night, to the Recovery Cost Center, and that those changes were tied to Maris's finance control group. No speculation, just here is what happened, here is when, here is who had ownership of the control object, here's the trail. I didn't send it to Slack, I didn't blast it to the company. I sent it to one place where things get taken seriously fast when money and controls start mixing. Internal audit. Arbor Crest had a whistleblower channel, technically managed by a third-party vendor. It existed so the board could say it existed. Most people never use it because they assume it goes nowhere. But I'd worked with audit before. I knew one thing about them. They hate being surprised. And this was the kind of surprise that can cost executives their jobs. I filed it under misrepresentation of discretionary awards and reclassification of employee compensation allocations. I used neutral language, no anger, no theft. I used the words audit understands, control override, misstatement, risk, employee compensation representation, inappropriate reclassification service, account activity, governance and approval chain. Then I attached the packet, and I waited. Not long, because on Monday at 9:13 I got a call from an internal number I didn't recognize. Kellen Armitage? A woman asked. Yes. This is Mira Danton, internal audit. Are you somewhere private? I looked around my apartment. Coffee, quiet. The kind of calm you only get before someone else's world starts collapsing. Yes, I said. She exhaled once. I've reviewed your submission. I need to ask you a few clarifying questions. Go ahead. Her voice was controlled, but I could hear the edge beneath it. When your manager spoke to you, she asked, did she use the phrase stabilization measures? Yes. And did she acknowledge the reclassification was intentional? She didn't deny it, I said. She tried to keep it off the record. Mira paused. Then, did HR accuse you of external sharing? Yes. Another pause. Kellen, Mira said, I'm going to be candid. This touches board-level reporting. I didn't respond. She continued. Your evidence suggests leadership represented awards as approved, while simultaneously routing allocations into a recovery bucket and then delaying payout without employee disclosure. That sentence was the first time anyone at the company said it plainly. Not timing, not alignment, representation. Mira added, that creates misstatement risk and employee relations exposure. We're escalating. I felt something loosen inside my chest. Not joy, not revenge, relief. Because once audit escalates, the game stops being personal. It becomes procedural, and procedures don't care who your friends are. 2 hours later, another email went out, this time not just from the CFO. It included the CEO. It included legal. It included internal audit as advisory. Subject, discretionary awards, immediate remediation. This one didn't say may be delayed. It said, all previously approved discretionary awards will be paid in full on the next payroll cycle. And right below it, a second line that made my hands go still. A review of financial allocation controls is underway. Certain leaders have been placed on administrative leave pending outcome. Certain leaders. They didn't name Maris in the email. They never do. But 10 minutes later, her status in Teams went gray. And by lunch, someone whispered the truth that spreads faster than any memo. Maris had been escorted out. Not loudly, not dramatically, just gone. That afternoon, I got a direct message from Bren in payroll. Heads up, deposit file updated. You're in the paid batch now. I stared at the message longer than I expected. Because money is never just money when someone tried to take it by turning you into a cost center. Thursday morning, the deposit hit. Not a partial, not a later adjustment. The full amount. And for the first time all week, I sat in my car outside the grocery store and just breathed. No music, no phone, just the quiet, steady realization that this was over. But it wasn't over in the way people imagine, where the bad guy falls and you get applause. It ended the way real corporate messes end, with a clean remediation plan, a few careers quietly erased, and a new policy document nobody will read until the next time someone tries it again. 2 weeks later, internal audit asked me to join a working group, an actual committee, to help redesign the compensation allocation controls so a service account couldn't reroute anything without dual approval and visibility. They offered me a title bump, too. Not because they suddenly respected me, because they needed credibility in the room. I took it. And I did one last thing privately for myself. I opened the bonus portal and expanded allocation again. This time, it showed Recipient, Kellen Armitage, Employee ID attached. Department cost center valid. A person, not a bucket. I closed the laptop and smiled, not because I'd won, because I'd learned the only lesson that matters in places like that. If someone tries to turn you into a cost center, you don't beg to be seen. You become the person who knows how the system speaks, and you let the system say it for you. The loudest thing in a company isn't a confrontation. It's a clean timestamp packet that forces powerful people to answer questions in writing.